So as I've said before in our lectures, work and education are very closely related. Most people go get an education so that they can get a career that feels fulfilling to them or can provide for their family. And they really generally will say that they want a career that makes them happy, or at least they have, a sense of satisfaction at the end of the day. So today we're going to be exploring the interaction between work and education and the process of exploring careers and job development, both for students and beyond. I think it's important to explore these things, as it's hard to be successful as a college student if you don't have a sense of how it's related to the world of work. So this is the wheel of career development. This was actually developed by the Internship and Career Center at UC Davis. And I think it really gives you a good sense of the process that goes into choosing a career, getting into career. Most of you are in the self-exploration phase, or should be, where you're trying to figure out a little bit more about yourself so that you can make some determinations about what careers might fit you. And then you'll go into researching the actual world of work. And then you should get into experiential education, which is actually trying out different areas of work through internships and volunteering and other types of things where you're actually experiencing it. Then you can make some decisions, and this is, figuring out where you're going from here. And then it's important for you to develop your job search skills. This involves everything from resume to cover letter to networking, interviewing, negotiating, all of those things that will actually get you the job once you've determined what job you like. And then finally, once you have the job, then you go into career management, and this is where you're actually dealing with your career and, growing or getting promoted or learning new things and dealing with office politics and things like that. Then people do change their careers pretty frequently, about 6 to 8 times in a lifetime. So this means that this cycle will start over for a lot of people at least a few times in their lifetime. So you decide you don't like what you're doing, then you're back into self-exploration phase and you do it all over again. So this is something that I like to show so that you know that this is a process. You don't automatically know what you want to do, and it takes some time to get to where you're going. So the very basic breakdown for career development is to know yourself, then know the job market, then make a decision. And then I've added to multiply that by developing your tools, like your resume, your cover letter, and things like that, because you actually have to have good tools to be able to get the job, and that will get you to a satisfying career. I think there's this idea that you can do whatever you want if you try hard enough, but I think that instead of doing whatever you want, you should figure out really what aligns with who you are, what your talents are, what your values and your skills are, instead of just arbitrarily picking a career based on salary or status. You should really find something that fits you for long-term fulfillment. So the part of the equation, the first part, is know yourself. And so what does that mean? Well, you really want to systematically explore your interests, which we did in this class, your skills, which is, things that you're good at, things that other people say you're good at, and they should be things that you also like to do, because I know there are some folks who have skills that they are actually very good at but don't actually like doing. So for instance, I'm really good at spreadsheets, but I don't really love doing them. So kind of figuring out what you excel at and thinking about how that might relate to a career area. Values, we talked about values, and this would be both your core values as well as your career-related situational values. Personality, so personality is, are you introverted or are you extroverted? So if you're an extrovert, you're probably going to want to be in an environment where you get to talk to people because that energizes you. If you're an introvert, you may want to be in an environment where you're not forced to talk to people all day because that tends to make you tired. Or are you more have an organized lifestyle and like everything planned out, or do you like to be spontaneous? There are different work environments that align with different personality styles. Geography is important. Where do you want to live? Do you have somewhere you have to live because you have children or a spouse who has a job that they don't want to leave? Or, it may be based on the career you want to go into. You may have to move, and is that a possibility for you? So, for example, you're probably not going to be very successful as a director film director in the middle of Nebraska. And then lifestyle. So, are you very into work-life balance? Are you a morning person? Kind of what is the lifestyle you want to live? Because different careers sort of set up different lifestyles and have different demands. So both of you, or all of you, have taken a values assessment and an interest assessment. So with what you now know about yourself, how might you apply that to your career and major choice? So I want you to be thinking about that throughout your time here this semester. A little more detail on skills. So in addition to thinking about the general questions that I mentioned earlier, things like what do other people say that you're good at, since many of us have a hard time identifying our own skills because we are humble or just have a hard time seeing the best in ourselves, what skills do you like to use and what comes easily to you. So looking for tasks and things that just kind of seem to just work for you. There are some assessments you can take to help look at your skills area. So you guys are familiar with California Career Zone, and they also have a skills assessment in addition to the interest assessment that you already took. I'm not totally in love with the skills assessment, but it's a nice starting place if you want to kind of play with it and look at what your results are. The Career One Stop, the top link that I have included there, actually I think is a little bit better. So you may want to go ahead and take advantage of this and see what results you get and see what jobs might use those types of skills. So I'm also going to provide some more detail about how personality relates to work and education. So the theory we're going to be exploring that relates to personality is something you might be familiar with, the MBTI, or the Myers-Briggs type indicator. So Myers-Briggs explored how different personality dichotomies, which are these pairs that you see here, relate to work environments. And so the idea is you get this 4-letter code and that's connected to certain places of work. There's some skepticism about how closely related each of the jobs are that they put forward and personality. But I think that this definitely has some application in at least giving you some knowledge about yourself. And that can often be applied to exploring careers, even though you don't necessarily have to pick a career that's related to your MBTI type. It is good to know where you fall on the scale of these dichotomies, and it allows you to have even more language to talk about yourself and your needs as related, in this case, to your personality. So I'm going to walk you through the dichotomies and then we'll get into a little bit more detail. So you'll see these pairs, which are also called dichotomies, and each, the left and the far right, are the pairs that go together. The items you see in the middle are what these pairs are indicating. So each of these is a spectrum, so you can land anywhere on the spectrum, so you don't have one or the other. But for the first one, it's looking at energy, how you get your energy. So for extroverts, or extroversion, which is E, and so your code would be E on that one, you get your energy from other people, from interacting. An introversion, you get your energy from having some alone time, more internally. For sensing and intuition, which is S and N, because I is already taken by introversion, this is looking at how you get your information. So you get information about the world. If you're sensing, you get it through your 5 senses, through data, through your eyes, your touch, your hearing, etc. It's more data driven. Whereas intuition, you get your energy more through your feelings about the world, your, as it says, your intuition, and it gets a little bit more gut feeling focused. The next dichotomy is about how you make decisions. And those who are T, or thinking, they make decisions by weighing the pros and cons, by looking at the data and the information and really looking at how all of that's going to create an outcome. Versus F, or feeling, you tend to think about how a decision would impact other people, how that makes you feel, and it might also involve a little bit more gut feeling in terms of decisions. The last one is lifestyle, how you live. And judging, J, doesn't mean you're judging other people, don't worry. It's just the word they use to describe it. Judging is living your lifestyle in a more organized and planned way. And perceiving is living a little bit more with a little bit more flexibility and a little bit less organization. And we'll get into some more detail about that in a minute. So here's an illustration of the dichotomy of how you get your energy. The extroverts getting energized by other people and external experiences, and the introverts being energized by inner resources, things like thinking things over, exploring your own thoughts and emotions, and internal experiences. So they're more internal. So somebody who is an extrovert would be very energized after going to a party. They would be all excited and be awake. Whereas somebody who's introverted, after going to a party, they would probably need some downtime, some time to regroup. It would be a little more tiring for them. So, that's an example of how this kind of this dichotomy actually happens in the real world. So sensing and intuition. I use the example of Sherlock and John from Sherlock, but many of you know the original story of Sherlock Holmes, and then John Watson is his sort of sidekick. And Sherlock Holmes's MO is that he's very good at noticing things about people and therefore solving crimes. So he is definitely an S. He uses his sensing function to take in information through his 5 senses, and it's all about the 5 senses. He's actually not very good at understanding people or intuiting anything. He doesn't have a lot of sort of gut emotion. It's more about really looking at the data around him. Whereas John is much better with people. He actually takes a more intuitive approach to the world. He takes in information by insight. So he'll get feelings about people. He thinks about people in a more, holistic and emotional way, and it's less about the data that's around him. So sensing and intuition, some tendencies and characteristics. Those who are sensing tend to see specific parts and pieces, and those who are intuitive see patterns and connections. And the example here is these 2 children with an airplane model. And the sensing girl says, assemble part A to part B. Step 2, glue these pieces securely. Step 3, find part C and connect to part D. So she's seeing the individual parts and how they work together. Whereas the boy who is intuitive, he is seeing the whole picture of the airplane. He might miss some steps. He might, not follow the steps exactly, but he sees the whole picture and sort of thinks about this overall image of an airplane while he is creating the model. For thinking and feeling, those who are a T or thinking, they tend to decide with their heads. Whereas those who are feeling decide with their hearts. So the example, the little cartoon of a thinking person is looking at a pros and cons list, and the feeling person is saying, well, this is important to me, this feels right, I'm going to make a decision based on that. Judging and perceiving, or judgment and perception. Those who are the J's, they like to have an organized lifestyle. And you can see the example of the desk there, and that's probably a J's desk. They also would be the kind of people that if they're planning a vacation, they want to have a very clear itinerary for what they're going to do each day. Whereas the perceiving person, they're more flexible and a little bit more spontaneous. And that, tends to be slightly less organized. So you see the example of the desk on the right, a little bit less organized. And they would approach a vacation by, kind of just showing up, maybe having a general idea of what they want to see, but really being more flexible with how they approach their vacation and not necessarily wanting or even liking to have an itinerary. So I have some examples that are kind of fun of the Myers-Briggs applied to some popular media. So this one's applying the types to the Game of Thrones show, and it's a little hard to read the individual descriptions, but you're welcome to look up Game of Thrones MBTI and you'll be able to find this. And so I think this illustrates that the individual types have specific characteristics based on this theory. So if you're an ENFJ, you're going to be different than an ENFP. And there will be some differences in terms of how you interact with the world, and they'll also provide a list of different careers. So again, it's not an exact perfect match for career, although it can be applied pretty well in some cases. But it's important to be aware of your personality and some of these characteristics that you have. Another example, Harry Potter. You can look up Harry Potter MBTI if you want to read the descriptions. And finally, Lord of the Rings. Can you tell that there's a bit of a geeky theme, but I love this stuff. So if anybody's curious, I am ENFJ, so pretty excited to be Dumbledore. But you can explore this and look at the types and the descriptions, and now that you've gone through the exploration of the different dichotomies and hopefully come up with a general sense of where you think you are, you can apply this. One thing to remember is these dichotomies aren't one thing or another, they're a spectrum. So you might be sort of in the middle on sensing and perceiving, or you might be very far on the judging side of things. So everybody can do both, but you may have a preference for one or the other. And that's sort of the key to this, is that it's a personality preference. It's not just one thing that you can do. It's just the thing that you end up using most often. So I, for example, am a J, and I can be spontaneous, but I tend to like to have a plan. I definitely fall more into that. I am farther on the J spectrum than I am, for example, on the thinking and feeling, the way I make decisions. I'm a little bit closer to the middle. So this, again, if you were to assess yourself, you might create a line between the two types and put yourself somewhere on that spectrum. So I'd like you to take some time now that you have this information to do that. And then for fun, if you like, look up some of these examples of MBTI, and they actually apply it to a lot of other movies and shows. If you have a favorite show, I bet that they have an MBTI for it. So take some time to explore. So what does your personality mean for choosing a major or a career? You want to think about what kind of things would an introvert like or dislike. So certain work environments they're gonna require that you're schmoozing with people all day. An introvert might not like that. So that would help you determine, maybe I'm going to skew towards careers where my entire job is not, interacting with people, where I have some interaction, but I have some time to be alone. The same thing with an extrovert. If they're alone in a cubicle all day, they're probably not going to be super happy because they need some human interaction to energize them. Judging, perceiving. How would this affect the way you like to work? So there are work environments that lean more towards judging, where it needs to be very structured. And there are some work environments that might have a little bit more flexibility, and that would drive a J crazy, but would be good for a P. So these kinds of things really can apply to the work environment. And you want to think about how that might be applicable to you and your choices in terms of your work. Sometimes it's helpful to think about an ideal work environment through visualization and thinking about what your workplace might look like, or your coworkers might be like, or your boss might be like, Willy Wonka, hopefully. But really imagining what your work will be like, even if you aren't really clear on all the different kind of work environments. Just sitting and thinking about it can help you identify certain characteristics of a work environment that might appeal to you. So I'd actually like you to take a minute and close your eyes, and I'm going to walk you through a visualization of your work day. And if there are things that really stand out to you that are very clear, I want you to take note of that, because this can apply in making your decisions about careers. So go ahead and shut your eyes, and I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I want you to answer them and really see what I'm walking you through. So you're waking up in the morning. What time is it? You're looking forward to your work day. What time do you have to be there? How do you get there? Do you walk? Do you take your bike? Do you drive? When you arrive, what is the first thing you see? Do you see a high-rise building? Do you see a small building in a business park? Do you see a ranger station in the middle of a forest? Do you see an aquatic center? What do you see as you walk up? When you open the door, are you greeted by a reception person? Are there a lot of people around? Or is it a little bit quieter? Does everyone greet you? Do you have interactions in the morning? Or do you go straight to your workstation? What is your workstation like? Do you have an office? Do you have a desk? Do you have a cubicle? Or are you outside? Or is it some other workstation? What's the first thing you do in the morning? Imagine it. What do you spend the rest of your morning doing? Do you have lots of interactions with other people? Or are you working solo most of the time? Are you dealing with paperwork? Are you working on a computer? Are you working with things? Are you working with animals? What does it look like? Lunchtime has arrived. What does lunchtime look like? Does everybody go out to lunch together? Does everybody have a more quiet lunch alone? Or is it something in between? What does the second half of your day look like? Do you have interactions with your boss? What kind of interaction is it? Is it a more hierarchical situation or a little bit more like equals? Are there several bosses that you have? Again, how much interaction do you have with your coworkers and other people? Are you interacting with the public at all? Or are you mostly doing work alone? It's the end of your day. How do you close down the day? What does that look like? What do you think about your next day looking like? As you drive home, or walk home, or bike home, take one last glance at your workplace and take note of what it looks like. Think about what you're looking forward to the next day. Think about what kind of meaning or impact you made that day. What are you most proud of in your work? What was most enjoyable? You get home and you look forward to another work day. Okay, so take a minute. If there were some things that really popped out to you, go ahead and write those down. So if you notice that you were pretty much working alone all day, that's important because that's going to be something that you're going to want to maybe look for in another or in a job. If you notice that you have a lot of interaction with other people, that's important to note. If you really wanted to work in a bustling city environment, that's something to pay attention to. All of these things, even if you don't know exactly what the job is, are a good thing to consider as you're making choices about career. So once you have a sense of what you want, you need to know the job market, because it doesn't matter how well you know yourself. If you don't know what kind of careers are out there, it's going to be hard to sort of match those up. This doesn't mean you need to know every possible job that is out there and make a decision from that. I was a career counselor and I didn't know every single job that's out there because there are thousands upon thousands of different jobs and different variations even on a single type of job. But you need to have sort of a basic knowledge of the job market. So doing some research on what's out there, and we have a career exploration worksheet that you're going to be doing that has you go look at certain websites that are designed for career research. So you will actually get to experience some of those, but you can also just Google things about different jobs. Do informational interviews. So I mentioned these briefly when we talked about communication. This is going out and talking to people who work in a field that you're interested in and asking them questions about their job so you can really get an insider view of that. Job shadowing. This is where you go and follow somebody around on their job for a day or more so you really see what it's like firsthand. then internships and volunteer opportunities. So this is where you're actually working in a field that you're considering and really show you whether or not this is right for you. So one thing that I always talk to students about, and is one of the sort of important parts of your journey, is to know that it is not a straight line. I think most people think that their career path looks like this. You start here, you go on this straight path, and then you get to this career at the end, right? And it's all lined up for you. And it's very easy to think this way because that's how our high school has been, and even college. You have certain things you have to do to get to where you're going. For high school, you have to do A through G requirements to get into the UC system, for example, and to go to college. And college, you have to do your GE breadth and your major classes to transfer, and then once you transfer, you have to do more units to get your major. Career is not really like that. It is actually more like this, a very winding path. And there's some examples of that nonlinear path on the infographic that's going to pop up, so I suggest you take a look at that. It is a bunch of people, you're going to recognize their names, that didn't really figure out what they wanted to do right away, and that's really okay. So as I mentioned on a previous slide, people change careers about 6 to 8 times in a lifetime. So this is not going from being a teacher at one school to a teacher at another school, or being a 2nd grade teacher to being a 5th grade teacher. This is going from being a teacher to being an accountant. People are not staying in one career throughout their life like they used to in the 50s. So it is more flexible. So if you're picking that first career and you're going into that, that doesn't mean you're going to be in that career for the rest of your life. There's really no right time frame to find a job or choose a career. It takes certain people longer than others, and I've shared with you kind of my journey on that first day of class, but I really do have had a winding journey to get to where I was going. I did not figure it out right away. I definitely didn't figure it out while I was a college student. And as you saw from the wheel we showed in the first slide, career development is a lifelong process. So you will be learning and growing and adjusting as you go. I'm 32 years old, and I've had my first career as a career counselor at a university, and now I'm developing the next career, and I'm still kind of adjusting that. So that's just how it is. You learn more about yourself and about the world, and then you make adjustments. So that's okay. It is very easy to procrastinate in exploring careers and doing research because it is very overwhelming, and there's a certain amount of fear that you're not going to make the right choice. You're feeling maybe a little uncertain. It can stop you from moving forward in the way that you need to. So I challenge you to start looking, because there is no right answer. There are a variety of careers that could be good for you, and even if the first one isn't, you have tons of time and tons of flexibility to make some changes. So here's that infographic with the different people you'll recognize and where they, at what point they got to where they are. So you'll see that really people weren't just right where they needed to be right away, especially not at the level when they're in college. So this sort of idea of flexibility and that non-linear path to getting to where you are, actually it has a theoretical basis, and this basis is this theory is called planned happenstance, and this is sort of preeminent theory in career counseling, and it's very well known within the field of career counseling. Basically, the idea behind planned happenstance is that you cannot know where you're going, and you cannot know what will lead to different opportunities, and it's being okay with that. So it's basically you start on this foundation of self-knowledge, and then you move forward with what you know about yourself, and you're open to opportunities, and then you say yes or no to those opportunities based on what you know about yourself, and that opportunity could lead to another opportunity you never anticipated. So let's say you do get offered an opportunity to go visit a local business focused on marketing, and it's just a visit for you to explore, and you go and you say, that sounds like it might align with some of my interests. I'm going to go. You're going to say yes, and you go, And then you meet somebody who works at that local company who focuses more on copywriting, and you didn't even know what copywriting was before you went on this. Copywriting is writing the actual words in an ad. And you found out about this new career, and you ask them if they'd be willing to sit down with you to kind of talk about their job. So you find this opportunity to learn more. And then when you talk to them, they offer you an opportunity to job shadow them, and you say yes because you know things about yourself. And then that might lead to an internship, which may, they'll take you to a conference, and that might lead to another opportunity for a different kind of job or the same kind of job. So you just don't know that that's going to happen. You didn't know you were going to meet this person. You didn't even know copywriting was a career when you went to this. You just said yes to this opportunity to learn more about a marketing company, and it led to opportunities. And this is often the story people will tell you. When you ask how they got where they were, how they decided to go into the field that they're in. It's often these sort of little happenstance moments that they had no idea were going to happen, and it led to things that they didn't even know existed. I love using this example. There's actually a career where you are the person who picks the cork, the actual material for wine corks, and they travel around looking at cork forests and cork producers and choosing the correct cork for wine. You think that guy, when he was in college, said, I'm going to be a cork buyer for wine companies? No. I bet that guy had a completely winding path to get to where he is, and it's a really interesting career. So that's really what I want you guys to remember, is that you do not need to know right now, but you do need to take advantage of opportunities as they arise, depending on what you know about yourself. So if someone offers you an opportunity that completely goes against your values and your interests, don't say yes to it, because that isn't probably going to turn out for you. But if it's something that's even somewhat interesting to you and you don't know much about it, but it sounds intriguing enough for you to spend the time, do that, because you never know what's going to come. You can also take your own action to initiate opportunities. So in that example I gave you, they asked that copywriter to sit down with them, and that opened up other opportunities for them. So if there's something you do know about yourself, you can actually take action to make an opportunity. And really, you can't know everything. You can't know what's going to happen. You can't know every career. So just make decisions based on what you know. And remember, we talked about indecision and uncertainty, which was the positive uncertainty theory. When we talked about decision making, it's really okay to be uncertain because you just don't know, and there's no way to know. The other thing to remember is major doesn't equal career. Just because you're majoring in psychology doesn't mean you have to be a counselor. There are many other opportunities, and don't think you have to only look at opportunities related to your major. And really, stay open. That's really what Planned Happenstance is all about. And remember that you don't have to have it all figured out right now, or even after you graduate. So just to sort of normalize that for you, if you don't know what you want to do yet, it's really not a big deal. Only about 2% of college students really know what they want to do for the rest of their lives, and that generally changes anyway. Remember, we talked about 6 to 8 times in a lifetime people change careers. So the average student changes their major, and we're not even talking about career, their major 3 or more times before they graduate. So, things can change. There's obviously some, regulations for the college and the universities for major change, and there's some difficulty occasionally with transfer, but you still can change. It's still possible. You do want to kind of check with your counselors or check with administration if you are looking at changing before you do so, but it is possible to change. So it's okay not to know exactly what you're going to do right now. So I hinted at this, but I think a lot of people think that the major you choose to study is a direct line to a career, and there are certain careers that are related to certain majors, and that's just how it works. Well, this is actually not true. Major does not equal career. So if you look at this, these 2 pie charts, the one on the left, this is a college and degree match. So this means that people are in a career that needed a college degree that matched their level of education, basically. So about 62% of people are in a career that requires the bachelor's level of education or master's level of education, whatever level of education they have. It matches. The second pie chart that you're looking at on the right, this is the major match. So what you're seeing here is that 27.3% of people are in a career that relates directly to their major. So this is barely more than a quarter of college graduates that are in a career that is directly related to what they studied. Obviously, exceptions exist. It is very, very difficult to be an engineer if you do not major in engineering. There are other, some sciences. It's hard to get into the sciences if you didn't have some science background in your education. But for the vast majority of things, you do not have to have a direct connection between your major and the career you're interested in. And this is because employers are really looking for soft skills gained through your well-rounded education. And so what soft skills means is basically, it's not like a technical skill. So a technical skill would be something like using Microsoft Office Excel or designing models on ArcGIS, which is a modeling software. Soft skills are things like communication skills, problem skills, active listening. I don't love that it's called soft skills. These are actually extremely important skills in a work environment, but it's just trying to make a distinction between them and technical skills. So in a Forbes study asking employers what they were looking for, and kind of looked at job descriptions to see what the top 4 in-demand skills were. They were critical thinking, complex problem solving, judgment and decision making, and active listening. So none of these are something that you learn from a particular college major. They're all just something you learn from your college experience and your college education. So they think hard skills is easier to teach. It's very hard to teach somebody critical thinking skills. So that's what employers really want, because they want somebody with a good basis in some of these soft skills, because they take a lot longer to develop. So another little piece, I know a lot of people think about, salary, and it does matter with your education. It does help you get a higher salary. We're very education focused in terms of careers. These days, it's very difficult to get certain careers without a degree, and you'll see that this does reflect in the money issues. So if you look at the bar graph on the left, this is the unemployment rate based on your level of education. And on the right, it's median weekly earnings. And this is federal. California can sometimes be a little higher because we have a higher cost of living, so our wages tend to be a little higher. But you can just get a sense of, what the differences are between people with higher levels of education and lower levels of education. So with somebody with only a high school diploma, unemployment is at about 8.3. And they're making about $652 a week, whereas somebody with a bachelor's degree, unemployment is a little less than half of the high school diploma unemployment. It's 4.5, and they're making quite a bit more. They're making over $1,000 a week. So, and that keeps going up as you get higher levels of education. For those of you who don't know what a professional degree is, a professional degree would be something like a JD, which is a Juris Doctorate, which is like a law degree, or a master's in public health, for example, is like a very professionally focused degree rather than a master's degree. Or a PhD doctoral degree, which are more academic. So one thing I just want to bring to light before we move on to resumes is that there are many options for you after you graduate, both to help you develop yourself for future employment or to be, just sort of a stopgap in between, or to educate yourself further. So you could potentially go to graduate school. So this is either enrolling in a master's program, which is usually about 2 years, a professional program, or a PhD program, which is usually about 4 years. You do not want to go to graduate school unless you need to go to graduate school to get into the career you want to go into. Do not just go to graduate school because you don't know what you want to do when you graduate with your bachelor's. It's very expensive. It's not like you can change your major like you can a bachelor's degree anything you do in graduate school, if you decide you don't want to continue in graduate school, you've just wasted that time and money. So I always want to say that, because a lot of people say, well, then maybe I'll go to graduate school. No, you have to be sure you want to go, and because it's related to career you want to go into. Another option, which is sort of what a lot of people think of, is the career option. So you graduate with bachelor's and then you find a job. There are service programs like Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, or City Year, and there's a lot of other ones as well, where you get paid a small amount, but you are housed and fed to do service projects. Peace Corps would be abroad. AmeriCorps is in the United States, usually in low-income populations. City Year is also in the United States, and it's usually related to education. You could travel for a little while. Some people take a year or 6 months or just a couple months to go explore the world before they jump into a career. You could teach abroad or volunteer abroad. There are a lot of programs to allow you to do that. Beyond Peace Corps and other service programs. For instance, my cousin did a program where he was teaching in Japan, and he hasn't left. He's still there. You could do part-time positions, or you could do temporary positions. So there's a lot of opportunity for you after you graduate, besides just the traditional career position.